Good morning and welcome to this morning's episode of the Amateur in the Morning. I am your host, the Forex Amateur. Today is the 23rd of October. It is a beautiful Friday morning out here in Durban. And for most people, it is the last trading day of the week. So, as I generally like to say, at the end of each week, make sure that if you have been trading this week and if you have been making a lot of profits this week, that you are very careful about what you do over the next day, or if you trade synthetics over the weekend as well. The last thing you want to do is to have been very productive during the week and to then give back all of your profits, right? So that is the last thing that you want to do, right? So with that being said, I just want to throw out my little disclaimer in there. Remember, I'm not qualified to provide any investment, financial, or even trading advice. Everything I speak about on these sessions or on these sessions is purely just my own opinion on the markets. Any trades that I do take are trades that I'm willing to take with cash that I am willing to risk. So make sure that anything that you do on your side is based on analysis that you've done, research that you've done, and decisions that you are comfortable making, right? Ensure that when you get in and when you do take trades, if you do take trades on your live account, ensure that you do it with cash that you are willing to risk, because at the end of the day, you could lose your entire investment, right? So let's get straight into the charts and let's not dilly dally around. Let's talk a little bit about volatility 10. So yesterday we did speak about volatility 10 and we are on the daily chart. And I did mention yesterday that we will expect volatility 10 to pop above this level in here. And as you can see, it did pop up very nicely and it did pop into this pink zone that I have been talking about for a good couple of weeks now, that we will see volatility 10 trade into this area. And as you can see, that happened very, very nicely. What I will expect to see for the course of today is I will expect to see a retracement, right? So chances are what we will see, let me just grab my little annotator in here, right? So what I will be expecting to see is volatility 10 coming back down into around these levels in here. And if it breaks through, I'll be expecting to see it break through this level and come into a retest perhaps down in and around this area in here, right? So overall, currently I am looking at a retracement on volatility 10. No specific no specific target in terms of where we are aiming for that retracement to go. But overall, as I have been speaking about for the past couple of weeks, I want to see it come back down into this pink zone in here. And then most likely it will then proceed back to the upside, right? So overall on volatility 10 for today, I am expecting to see it retrace. But if we do see a continuation of the bullish momentum, because remember, we've broken about this previous high. So what could happen here is we could pop back in here and find support in this level and see this market continue to close back to the upside. So that is very definitely a high probability, sorry. And if that does happen, then we will most likely expect to see it pushing back to the upside and just going all the way up into that area in there. I would actually prefer if it would come back down to do a retest, right? Then we can get back in on a bit more longer positions and aim much higher, right? So that is what I'm looking at for today. And I will be watching this level in here to see if we can get that retracement or if the market wants to continue back to the upside, right? Let's move on to volatility 25-1S, which has been the front runner for yesterday because I did call retracements on volatility 25-1S and price was around here yesterday, and I did mention that we will be chasing this level over here to the upside. And as you can see, price bounced on this level again and then it went all the way back to the upside. So looking at the daily chart, I will be expecting to see price sort of continue. Remember, our overall objective is price to come back down into this level over here to the downside. What we are seeing at the moment is just probably a retracement, right? So one thing I want to bring your attention to is the fact that price respected this low and it failed to break below this low. That is telling us that there is a high probability that we will see price pull back into this pink zone that I've got highlighted here on the upside before we see any sort of huge bearish momentum back to the downside, sorry. So that is what I am looking at currently on volatility 25-1S. As you can see that my major focus right now is if you were to call this a double top, right? Then you would expect the second leg of the double top to break below the neckline if you do trade double tops, right? I don't, but I do notice it very often on the chart, so I just take note of it, right? But looking at that, I would say that the fact that price has failed to break below this level will tell us that there is a possibility that it will come back into this pink zone that I have over here to the upside. Now I'm getting a bit repetitive, but that is basically what I am looking at. If we look at the H4 chart, you'll notice that that level that I've highlighted on the daily also ties in very well with the level that I've got monitored on the 4-hour chart as well, which is up in here, right? So if price does come back into this level in here, then chances are it's most likely going to trade a bit higher before it comes back to the downside. But overall, I am looking at bearish momentum coming back into the market from around this level, these levels up in here, and possibly above this level in here, depending on what price wants to do. But looking at what we've got in here, what we might see as well is a young pullback into these levels down here before we see the market pushing back to the upside, right? Cool. So that is it for today. I would assume that I would still be looking for buys on volatility 25-1S until it gets into these levels in here. And then I will start looking for sells back to the downside. Let's look at volatility 75, and looking at VIX 75, I did speak about continuation of bullish momentum yesterday, and you did see that we did see a continuation of that bullish momentum in yesterday's candle, but we closed back to the downside. We closed as a very indecisive candle on yesterday's candle, so that's telling us that there is a possibility that we will see this market come back to the downside, right? So coming back to do that retest. It is struggling to break above this level in here. Let me just reference it. So it is struggling to break above this level in here that I have been speaking about very, very often recently. And I will be looking to see if we get a break back below this level, then chances are we will see this market breaking back down. But if we continue to trade above this level, then we will continue to look for buys, right? Remember, that is not as high as I want to see it go. I would like to see it come back into this area in here. And once it pops into this area, chances are it's then going to trade back to the downside, right? So looking at volatility 75, chances are we're most likely going to continue seeing buys for today. I do know that I can see the fact that we've rejected really hard off the top, right? So that's telling us that there is a presence of bearish momentum. But remember, the rejection in itself doesn't speak volumes. The reason for that is because we had rejections on these candles as well, but they still traded back to the upside. We had a rejection on this candle, and it still traded back to the upside. So I don't really base my analysis on rejection candles, but what I would be looking at in this area here is the fact that price will come back into this area here, and then I would most likely be looking for sells back to the downside. If we drop down to the H4 chart, I generally like to stick on the on the daily chart with these sessions. The reason for that is because I can give you much more of a long-term analysis of the markets based on that. But you know, it is what it is. So looking at here on the 4-hour chart, we can see that price has rejected really strongly off the upside there. We do see that we have these levels in here where price has rejected off this trend line. You can call it that if you would like. I'm not really using the trend line for that specific reason. What I would expect to see is if price can come back down into these levels in here, which I have been watching, and it has been on my chart for a while now, then I would still be looking for buys to take price back up into this gray zone that I've got highlighted in here, where I will be then looking for sells back to the downside, right? So looking at this market at the moment, you can see that we have a huge presence of sellers coming into this market. And chances are we will see it revisit this level if the momentum does continue before we see it pushing back to the upside, right? So let's move on to volatility 50, and then that will be the end of today's session. Now, on yesterday's session, I did speak about the fact that on volatility 50, we will see a continuation of bullish momentum, and that did happen. As you can see on yesterday's candle, it did trade back into this level in here that I have been speaking about for a while. And you can see that we're getting very hard rejections off of that level. Which is pretty good at the moment, right? But remember, our overall momentum at the moment is still to the upside, so I will be expecting to see price come back into these levels in here before I see it pushing back over to the downside, right? So currently, I am still off the thought that I should be looking for buys on volatility 50. So let's just drop down to the H4 chart to see what is happening on here. So looking at the H4, we do see that a hard, very strong bearish push to the downside in here, and a huge push back to the upside, breaking the high of this candle. but we cannot obviously ignore the fact that we had like a double top in here and it's broken the structural low in this instance, because that would be a higher high, that will be a higher low in relation to this high and this low that we've got in here, right? So you can see that this market was making lower highs, lower lows in this instance. Let me just pencil it down. So lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. And this is the first higher high and higher low that we can see happening in this market, right? So with that being said, what we would be expecting to see is we would be expecting to see this market push back to the upside. But we do see this double top formation pattern in here with a break below that lower, that higher low in there, right? So currently, I would say that volatility 50 is very indecisive, right? But I am still of the thought, like I said, that we will see it trading back to the upside before we see it pushing back down, right? So for now, I am still of the thought that we will see buys coming into volatility 50, right? Let me just drop down to the H1 and see what we've got on here. Yeah, yeah. It is looking very bearish though. So I would actually be sitting out on this one at the moment. The reason for that is because there is no clear definitive direction. I do know on the overall price wants to push back to the upside, right? But I cannot ignore the fact that we've got this huge bearish push here, breaking lows, and then a continuation to the downside, right? On the daily chart, right? Another thing is if you run your fib from here to here, from here to here, you'll see that we do have price sort of trading down towards my money zone, which will play down in here, right? Obviously, you wouldn't have my money zone on the phone, but that is what I that is what I notice when I look at this chart, right? So looking at that, I would expect to see price is still obviously trading below this low, which is the structural low for the structure in here. So overall, it's telling us that there is a lot of bearish possibility in here, right? But as we have seen the bullish retracement in this instance, we would expect to see a push back up. So for now, I honestly would be sitting on my hands in this one, right? Because there is a lot of conflicting thoughts that I'm having in this instance. We've got these big wicks here at the top, which would most likely be filled before we get any clear directional bias on this market. So for now, to be honest, I will be sitting on my hands on volatility 50. I'm not really looking to take any trades on it because the H1 chart for me is screaming buys, right? At the moment, it's screaming short-term buys for a bit more of sells coming back down into these levels in down here, all right? So perhaps we'll see it revisit this area in here, retest the structure before we see it push back down into that level. That is a probability, you know. So it's all over the place at this point. So I'm just sitting on my hands with volatility 50. So that's it from my side. Not really much I can speak about over and above that. I believe that I've covered all of my thoughts on this session. So I hope it was very informative for you. I hope it was educational. If possible, remember, if you have any suggestions, any things that you want us to look at, make sure you drop it down in the comments as well if you are watching this on YouTube, obviously. So that's it from my side. And I don't really have much more that I want to speak about. So until next time, it has been a pleasure, as always, to share. And I am wishing you guys a blessed and a profitable trading day. And if today is your last day trading, I am also wishing you a blessed weekend as well. Remember, this is the last session for this week. The next episode of the Amateur in the Morning will only be on Monday, and that will be the 26th of October. So I'll be looking forward to speaking to you guys again next week. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day and weekend.